our first author tonight, and I'm very happy that you're here. Thank you very much, Thomas Lehr. Thomas Lehr, who lives in Berlin and was originally, as I read online, a biochemist, and became in the late 90s decided to become a writer, thank God, and has started writing and publishing. And I just want to pick out a few highlights of his great work. He published in 1999 his novel Nabokov's Katze, a novel that is a very detailed study of the social setting and the panorama of the German Republic, of the Bundesrepublik Deutschland of the 1970s and the 1980s. In 2001, his novel Frühling, Spring, appears, which is a monologue, kind of a stream of consciousness of a dying man who looks back at his life in I think a characteristic with a characteristic language written in a very eccentric with a very eccentric punctuation and a particular style that I think very much makes the fear and the pain and the worries of this man really tangible. And in 2010, finally, Thomas Lehr published the novel from which he will read tonight, September. It is the story of two fathers and two daughters whose lives are linked by the attacks on 9/11, the 11th September 2001. So that links these two families because one is in the United States, the daughter of one man dies in the attacks, and the other man lives in Iraq, and his daughter dies in Baghdad in an attack in 2004. So that's just the rough setting. And Thomas Lehr will say a few words, and that's great about maybe the theoretical background of his writing and of this text in particular, and also maybe link. I think he will also mention some links to the Arabian Nights, which is amazing. He's also happy to answer a few questions, and he will read in English from the English translation of his book, but he will start with the German one page of the German original, so that we get a feeling of the original sound. Thank you very much, Thomas Lehr.
Thank you, Jan. Nice to be here. Good evening. I planned to give you a little kind of making of this novel September, which is translated in English completely by Mike Mitchell, a very fine Scottish translator. And it's not too theoretical, but so you can have an impression of what moved me to write this book. Of course, the most novels are founded in personal experience, and September is no exception. Although none of my books is so far away from my own life and experience than September. The starting point was the last chapter of my third novel, named Nabokov's Katze. Jan mentioned it. It is located in New York City, and the main character, Georg, a movie director, is visiting the top of the World Trade Center with a female friend. The scene plays 1994, and this was the time I visited the north of the Twin Towers by myself, making a lot of photos of Manhattan from this magnificent point of view. The second time I visited New York City was in May 2002. I had been invited by the Goethe Institute for a reading from my novella Spring. This book, which deals with a very serious subject, abuse of medicine in Germany under National Socialism, by using a quite experimental poetical language in prose, is deeply connected with the novel September. At the third day in New York City, I visited Ground Zero. It was hard to stand. Since 9/11, 2001, I was struck by the political events, and I had begun to collect material, newspapers, books, TV documentations, without really making the decision to write a book about this. In 2005, after having published the novel 42, it is a book about, a novel about the philosophy and physics of time, I had to make the decision to start a novel about 9/11 or not. I was afraid, and I had to think about my fears. Obviously, each author must be cautious if he tries to approach the Middle East conflict. The complexity of the political circumstances is really puzzling, and obviously, again, a German writer especially will have to hesitate before he decides to write about Iraq and the Gulf Wars, which necessarily touches the conflict between Arabs and Jews and the German-Israeli relationship. What made me go on was a primary idea I had. Don't write just another 9/11 novel, but try to tell the conflict from both sides. Give not only an American view, but add an Iraqi view with the same intensity. All the years long, the 5 years I needed to write this novel, this was a legitimation and a comfort. A book which seriously tries to give both sides a chance would be at least interesting and worth to make an extraordinary effort, just from a moral or ethical point of view. In addition, I found in an early stage of the work a way to organize the novel, seeking for help while facing a highly complex subject. Two books came into my mind. The first was Johann Wolfgang Goethes Westöstlicher Divan, West Eastern Divan. The second had been the fairy tales from the Arabian Nights. By these books I got the idea for the main characters of my novel, two older men situated in different cultures like Goethe and Hafiz, and two young girls like Shahrazad and Dunyazad, the two sisters of the Arabic Nights, whom are located in different cultures too. Two fathers and two daughters who got deeply involved in the conflict. The whole story should not be written as a panoramic and broad picture like Tolstoy's War and Peace, which has been written 60 years after the anti-Napoleonic wars, but should be given as a kind of intimate play with a small number of characters. What I needed in addition was the language. Since my first novel, I'm trying to find an own and appropriate kind of language for each of my books. The language, the way of manner to organize and express a subject in the best way I can find and achieve normally solves my problem with the book. Facing the subject, the 9/11 attacks, the war against Iraq, the history of the Middle East, the oil conflict, the role of Islam and its relationship to terrorism, I was scared, and I saw flickering or scintillating pictures of the war, the desert, the screens which showered us with pictures we hardly understood. Trying to write down the first page in the voice of Dunyazad, I found the way. If political and historical science had not set a period behind the history of 9/11 and the war against Iraq, why should a novelist set one? And so I started and went on with a tentative, flickering, uncertain and doubtful language which helped me to come close to the characters and leaded me through war and peace. I undertitled the book as a mirage to express this special attempt. There's no point, there's no semicolon in the text, it's like a carpet, an oriental carpet, and all voices are muddled together. And this was very important for me to survive this martial and bloody subject. The mixture of prose and poetry I found in the original and in the translation of Claudia Roth inspired me to mix, to came near to poetry in my prose, and I mixed some poems into the novel too. But the main thing what fascinated me is the story of the Arabian Nights, to avoid or to ban death by telling a story. And this is the sense and the important lesson I took from the Arabian Nights. I will give you two short chapters which haven't to do with war and so on, but have more to do. They are from the beginning of the novel, and they have to do with Arabian Nights and this and how I deal with this motive. The first scene is the beginning of the books of the novel, and the first pages are given in the voice of Muna, the 17-year-old female Iraqi student. She remembers the wedding of her older sister Jasmine and turns the memory into a fantastic scene which should remember to the narrative frame of the Arabian Nights. I give you the first page in German, so you have the original sound, and then I read it again in English and continue. Muna. Unsere Geschichte hängt in der Luft in der Nacht. Schwester. Denn du beendest sie nicht. Ihr seidener Faden hält unser Leben unsichtbar im Dunkeln. Wer ihn zerschneidet, braucht es nicht gewusst zu haben. Immer schon wunderte es mich, weshalb es den König nicht störte, dass Dinarasad jede Nacht unter seinem Bett lag. Und ich fragte mich auch, um was für ein Bett es sich handelte, damit sie darunter liegen konnte. Ich denke es mir oben wie einen kleinen Palast aus Seidenkissen, Flamingofedern, schwellendem Purpur, Rosenblättern und Zungen. Und darunter den Staub, die Knochen, die Spinnweben. Ich habe keine Ahnung, wie sie die Schlafstätten der Könige bauten im Inselreich von Indien und China. Im fernen Osten, in dem es noch exotischere Märchen geben soll als hier in Bagdad. Nirgendwo fantasiert man besser als unter dem mächtigen Bett meines Großvaters. Ich kannte ihn nicht. Er starb ein Jahr vor meiner Geburt und war eine Art Radio- und Fernsehkönig. In seinem Haus in Wasseria, in dem ich mit Sami Verstecken spielte, um auch ihn so oft unter jenem Bett zu finden, in dem meine Großmutter alleine schlief, schon seit mehr als 1000 Nächten. An jenem Tag vor 3 Wochen, in dem ich, 17-jährig, nur aus Spaß noch einmal das Versteckspiel wiederholte, allein dieses sich begraben am helllichten Tag, Skorpion im Wüstensand, während draußen im Innenhof seit Stunden die Hochzeitsgesellschaft tafelt, trinkt, tanzt, liege ich noch einmal unter dem nach Rosenwasser, Lavendelsträußchen, Moder und getrockneten Orangenschalen riechenden Bett. Der Spaß, den ich mir machte, war aber nur die Flucht vor der Flucht. So far in German, this novel. And I do the same in English and continue, I have better writing here, and continue the scene to the end of the first chapter of the novel. The chapter is called The Ship. Our story is hanging in the air in the night, sister, for you don't bring it to an end. Its silk thread holds our life invisibly in the darkness. Whoever cuts it does not need to have known that. I've always wondered why it didn't bother the king. The Dinarasad lay underneath his bed every night. And I also wondered what kind of bed it was that had room enough for her to lie under it. I imagine that on top it was like a little palace of silk cushions, flamingo feathers, rose petals, a mound of crimson, and underneath, the dust, the bones, the cobwebs. I've no idea how kings' beds were constructed. In the island realm of India and China, in the Far East, where there are supposed to be even more exotic fairy tales than here in Baghdad. Nowhere is there a better place for giving free rein to your imagination than under my grandfather's massive bed. I never knew him. He died a year before I was born. He was a kind of king of radio and TV. In his house in Vasseria district, where I used to play hide and seek with Sami, and would often find him as well under the bed, my grandmother had already been sleeping in alone for more than 1,000 nights. On that day, 3 weeks ago, when I, at 17, played hide and seek again, alone, just for fun, burying myself in broad daylight, a scorpion in the desert, sand, whilst outside in the courtyard the wedding guests have been eating, drinking, dancing for hours. I'm once more lying under the bed that smells of rose water, sprigs of lavender, mold and dried orange peel, but my fun was just an escape. Before my escape. It had come to the point where I could not longer stand the coldly dripping stare, spittle on ice cubes, of the major, that supposed friend of my sister's bridegroom, her new husband, who takes everything with a smile. I lay perfectly still under the slatted base, in the tomb of widowed women. I wished Sami were beside me again as a 10 or 12-year-old boy, cheerful, with no fear, ready for anything, that would have secretly tipped salt in the major's arrack or even spat in his misty drink. For a second his glass shone out in the courtyard like my sister's dress, embroidered with glass beads. "My little dove," he said to me, as if I were a child, and accidentally on purpose touched my breast with his elbow. "My little dove." And in my mind's eye I saw the Kurdish boy on the edge of Sadoun Park ripping the feathers of a dove that had been hit by a car off me as if the blood were pouring out of my nipples. I'm holding my hands flat over them as the slats under the large mattress bend, "Sister, they almost hit my face. He calls you his little dove as well, Jasmine." That voice, just as I was about to crawl out from under the bed. "I must have you today, here as a bride. It could well be the last time, believe me, come on. Kasim won't notice, I'll booze with him and he's incapable of undoing his flies. Lie down, my little dove." And like you, I have to spread my legs wide, turn my knees outwards, put my head on one side, as if the springy slats, grey, dusty heart, were going to kiss me, break my nose and teeth. You too, the beast, girt with the bouncing ribs of a ship's hull. King Death, his stake inside you. I only saw it as a stone, the onyx of a god in a showcase, and as a gangling appendage of my brother before he started school. He's rocking you from inside. What does he know of your treasures, sister? What a groaning camel you two have become in the desert night, a camel with two humps on opposite sides. Doves in the night, white, black, white. Night boarded up with groaning wood. Wood, don't break the bones of my face, my ribs under shivering skin, under the assault of the slats of dinosaur ribcage in which you are raging hip to hip. I can feel your heart, the heart of a red ifrit. It could be a ship's keel, sailing away above me, the whole hull of a ship, the slatted base bent into shape, fitted together anew, enlarged, rising high in the air. Sister, your shared bed is the sailing ship of your perfidious love. In the resonant sky, behind my closed lids, I can see forever, as if your dhow had sailed from a harbor in the middle of the desert, straight up into the sky. Sand, dry grains trickle onto my cheeks. What can those shapes be, moving in the billowing sails below the sloping yards? The wind blows us powerfully upwards. Or are you being drawn up by the lust of the king who bathes in green oil? What's this? I'm dreaming. It's nothing. It's just the major burning inside my sister. How can she bear it? Either marrying the wrong man or letting herself be used, or living between two lies. Don't shoot your load inside me, she suddenly says, as cool as if she were in her laboratory, with a lab technician, a retort in her hand, whilst the butcher of doves bluffs through seventh heaven below me, as I drift along under your keel like the bright shadow of your anchor. And 6 heavens and 7 earths on the back of the bull that has placed its hoofs on the fish in the last water of the Black Sea, wrestling on the darkness. Forget everything, forget everything. I ought to raise my voice now and say, "Tell me a story, sister." But you are in another country. This was the first scene. The other one, this is the voice of Muna, and the novel switches between the four characters, and all the pages long till to the end. You have the fathers, the daughters in an ever switching way. The next scene is at page 50 or 60. And you hear the father of the of Sabrina, of the American girl who died in the World Trade Center. But this scene is situated in the year 2000, before everything happened. And Martin and he's divorced and has a new lover, which is called Louisa. She is teaching as a professor for Spanish at Amherst College, as he does. He's a teacher for German. And they are visiting Europe, and they came to the Alhambra. And this is, of course, you know, an interesting object for all of us, where European and Oriental culture are mixed together or situated in the same place and room. And I tried to remember to the fairy tales of to the Arabian Nights and to Goethe in this short sequence where we find the both lovers in a hotel in the garden of the Alhambra. The gardens of the Alhambra that we haven't seen yet, that's waiting for us out there in the fresh morning air. We're still lying together, breathing heavily. A tiny silvery bird shoots past, searching for its golden tree. Louisa, the powerful body beside me. Book a room on the second floor 6 months in advance, she says, placing a hand on my navel, as if, like all those who live in paradise, I had never been born. And you will get a genuine Andalusian woman before breakfast. The white shimmer of a network of fine lines on a round, bronzed thigh, like light reflected in a pool. The miracle of still being able to love again. Our hotel was part of the palace and a mosque that was converted into the San Francisco monastery. Louisa has fished the hotel brochure out of the drawer of the bedside table. She is very pleased with the belated heresy of our love in the former monastery. Amid ornate Spanish wooden furniture, in a massively commodious bed, in which I'm sure a Ferdinand and an Isabella must have gone about their Catholic duty of producing an heir. First of all, breakfast, and then the East. That works much better here than in Frankfurt, especially my imagination. Close your eyes. She turns her head towards me, so we are lying forehead to forehead. A still happy past copy of me and this tall, strong Spanish girl, whose parents fled before Franco's army from Seville to Barcelona, then to Paris, and before the German Wehrmacht from Paris to Marseille and Lisbon and via London to New York. We met as if rejuvenated in the new world, and now, as old age appears over the horizon, we are going back to be young again in Europe, or rather in the morning garden and palace of the part previously occupied by the Moors. So tell me, what it's like, this Eastern world you wouldn't have bothered with if old Goethe hadn't forced you to, with his penultimate love? To Louisa's forehead. You mean the positive aspect, the naive fantasy, the gazelle in the morning breeze, the chintz that dwarf a mountain and shoulder a whole town, to set it up somewhere else and become powerless in a little bottle with a stopper, like the past, our childhood, when we read about them. The absolute tyranny, Louisa says, the power and the celebration of it, in the extravagant splendor of the palaces, all those slaves, servants, eunuchs, the harem, I say, all those hidden rooms, corners, hiding places, screens, caverns, chests and wicker baskets, clay pots that people hide in, flying carpets, colored smoke, terrible mutilations. Louisa remembers gigantic birds, the ever-present possibility of metamorphosis at any moment. Any character can receive a new destiny. Merchants' sons into beggars, maidens into demons, kings into eagles, donkeys into dogs, so that human existence blends in one single, unfathomable shimmering ornament in the stonework of time. I read the story of Scheherazade as a child in Bremen. That exasperating barber, Louisa says, who ruins another man's life with his importunate chatter, is so true to life, as is my concern, my reawakened concern, which I remember just as well, that basically still perfectly happy worry that struck me at breakfast on the Hotel Peychaud, softly plashing fountain, Moorish arcade, shimmering orange trees, surreal like holograms in the light. To be immediately discovered and exposed by Louisa, who has 2 sons from 2 divorced marriages. Charles, who's at university in Boston and regards me critically, and Francis, who might one day be a good painter if he managed to get away from the New York party scene. She's 19, my love. She's on the pill. She's got more sense than my 2 boys will ever have between them. I must trust Sabrina. I don't have to shut my eyes to see her in my mind's eye in Munich, Florence, Rome, beside her cousin, who's 4 years older. She seems weightless, almost ephemeral, and that's emphasized by the loose, long-sleeved shirts she often wears. At 15 and 16, she wore short skirts and shorts and used to adorn herself with pearl necklaces, rings, bracelets, as to convince herself of her own youth. But now she conceals herself. Her guarantee is the strength you've given her. The rest, Louisa says, is a matter of luck. And back there in Granada, there was a great comfort to me. I thought how beautiful Louisa must have been at 18 or 19, and that she'd survived it. And I was now a relaxed and beaming 50-year-old, full of worldly wisdom, sitting opposite me, out there in the gardens, among the walls, ruins in the palaces of the Alhambra. I was overcome despite the countless tourists poured out by the busload, in the inner courtyards, around the basins, among the pillars, slaves to their camera lenses, making all the scripts into pictures. The calm, the silence, the light. In the myriad form of the filigree explosion of a central apogee on the ceiling of the Sala de los Apenserajes, a divine cobweb, honeycomb of the angels, if only the universe had such a roof. The palace takes you out of this world. The entwined ornamentation releases your soul. The precisely gauged watercourse in the garden liberates you. That's what he was looking for, Louisa says, the exotic calm, the enraptured splendor, the presumed immutability of the Old East, while in Europe, freedom and its demon were toppling the thrones and making the empires tremble. After 20 years of war, hope, defeat, devastation, the emperor's great boot crushes the dusty old rotten Princeton, finishes off Prussia. The Grande Armée sucks in tens of thousands of young men and destroys them in Russia. Battle of Leipzig, Battle of Waterloo. For decades, history played his bloody roulette. Anyone who had been polishing the emperor's boots one day found himself having to write the hymn to freedom for the revitalized, ailing old kings. The next, belief in the immutability of power, a non-perishable dogmatic belief that keeps having its successes to celebrate. The palace survives, at least
In this case, I didn't really miss Sabrina there, on that so indestructible seeming island of the past. I was perfectly happy just to be half of a middle-aged pair of lovers on the meandering path to the throne room. If I'd had as much to say as outside the Gerbermühle in Frankfurt or in Weimar, I would perhaps have wished Sabrina was with us, but the time for giving her lectures was long since past. Actually, since she was 7. When I realized that I could talk to her about almost anything, that in the way she looked up at me you could see, as in all children, the powerful universal interest, the guarantee of the complete renewal of humanity through human beings, the little Buddha who one day will know everything with his billion-fold brain. Goethe should have strolled round the Alhambra instead of Heidelberg Castle during the time out of his Hessian oriental love, Marianne, the little Blücher, as he liked to call her, plucks her guitar. On his last island, the great emperor plays with the grey wave of his dead. Once he conquered Egypt, woke the pyramids from their sleep. 232 transport ships, 2,000 cannons, 32,000 soldiers, 175 scholars. The East awoke with a groan beneath his sweltering heat, its dusty palm trees, its crumbling palaces, in its cut-off mattresses beneath the body of the aging Turk, in its own blood, just a graze at first. Imagine the old Goethe, bent and white-haired, toothless but slim, once more standing upright in his brown coat, surrounded by his usual admirers and delighted experts, or perhaps with only his art expert, Müller, just a pair of them, like us, going into the court of the lions, carefully twisting the stalk of a ginkgo leaf between his fingers, and immediately explaining the proportions between the elegant columns that look as if trimmed up in the sunrise with their floating lace. 12 lions bear the basin of the fountain in the middle, 3, the Trinity, the complete number, heaven, earth, hell, earth, 3 times 4, the divisible but all-encompassing number of the 4 cardinal points of the elements of the bodily humus, makes the 12 signs of the zodiac, while the sum of the Trinity and the 4 quarters of the compass represents the 7 planets, corresponding to the 7 arcades on either side of the court of myrtles. That could have been the way, he thought, and held forth. Or quite the reverse, cursing all mathematical sorcery, indulging therefore in non-quantitative reflections in the face of the lions, stepping over the rectangular course of the 4 streams of paradise. I remember a few moments, lasting a few heartbeats, half a minute, perhaps, during which the 2 of us were suddenly alone, in the court of the lions, in the Alhambra, detached from a stream of tourists, a happy chance that left us confused, alone in the sunny stone-paved quadrangle between the colonnades, covered with their pointed roofs. Everything, even the fountain in the middle, is smaller, more intimate than we had expected, more personal, as if paradise were just a hall, flooded with light. With her gleaming black hair, her firm bosom, her red blouse, her black trousers, her leather shoes in which she could dance flamenco, Louisa seems perfect and complete to me. In the silence of the light, playing on the arabesques of the capitals of the columns. She's in the right place, I think, for one false happy moment, the way you like to delude yourself about the harmony, the understanding, the tolerance, the productive cooperation of cultures in the Andalusia of Arab rule. There is still the palace, and beneath it the sweating, groaning, bleeding foundations, whose longing it reflects in the gold of the inner courtyard. For one more improbable moment of silence, it suddenly seems to me as if Louisa and I had a light passing through us, were being scanned or X-rayed that leaves no part of us hidden, that flows through ourselves to the painful, liberating limit of transformation. Refugees from the old world, a couple soon tiring, that had the good fortune to find each other late in life. in the light of a place where we cannot be, our only paradise, not to know yet what is to come. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your reading. Are there questions? I don't know whether it's appropriate to, or comments or impressions maybe you want to share. We discussed this morning also whether the Arabian, or this afternoon when we talked about the translations of the Arabian Nights, and we're kind of deploring also the fact that maybe doesn't give way to other Arab literature and Arabic literature, or we expressed the hope that maybe translations of the Arabian Nights would lead to, would encourage publishers to maybe also publish other Oriental Arabic texts. Are there other texts you've taken, Arabic Oriental texts you've taken inspirations from?
Yes, I had many recommendations because I spoke to Orientalists and friends, and by the years writing, I made I learned many from writers from Arabian countries, which I met, and we talked about literature, world literature, of course, because the most are influenced by French or German or Spanish, or by the whole world literature. And they told me what I can read the most. I had to read in English, of course, and because we have not so many translations. Of course, we have Hafiz in German, since Rickert does his great work, and we have some collections of Arabian prose, of classical Arabian prose, and poetry. I read. But I cited poems of Abu Nuwas and Al-Mutanabi, and there is no translation in Germany. And I wrote it in this book, in the last page, that we should have. but till today, no one has made a good edition of Abu Nuwas and Mutanabi. And I always are complaining. And I had to read the most things in English, or there are some parts which of poetry or prose which is translated by the translators of the 19th century, and Rickert especially, and Hammer Purgstall was important.
I wonder, has there been any response on the specific component of the Arabian Nights in your novel, in reviews and critics who say, well, this is very appropriate use of the African Nights, or maybe they criticize this because it's Orientalist, but in a setting which is very realistic.
I played around a lot with motives, because the characters are novel, are very educated, and so they're knowing what they do, and especially the Arabian or the Iraqi doctor knows much about Orientalism. So I played around with, and so the critics hadn't been angry, because I had a rather subtle way to do it, but for the public it was good, I think, because that made it easier for the public to come to this hard subject of war and peace. They were consolated that there is a cultural background, and there are things which are more important than only the 20th century, and that's what I wanted to give. What the difference is between, I use these old books and these, I use the Arabian Nights, and I used Goethe, and I use the classical, I make citations of classical Arabian poetry. There are many citations of verses. I made own verses to give another background, an historical background, to calm down, to see that we aren't captured in the 20th century or in 21st century, and to open the mind. And that was in reviews, and in the most cases it was I had no problem with using it, and the people were interested and accepted this way.
And, if I remember well, in the novel Frühling,
yes,
you use the idea of the last 39 seconds.
Yeah.
This to me, this seems to be a motif from the 1001 Nights as well, because it's also narrating against death. So maybe
yes.
you were influenced by the 1001 Nights without knowing it.
No, I saw it, but I you can and I mentioned the connection, yes, and sometimes as an author you think what you make visible from the backgrounds, and I didn't make it visible in Spring, but of course I thought about it, about a character who is he's telling or a story against death, or to ban death, and it's the same idea. So
this is in Nabokov also?
No, I don't think so. Perhaps there are some children's scenes, perhaps of the lectures and readings of books. The main character has read as a child, but I'm not sure. No, I don't think so.
And the next novel?
The next novel has in some parts to do with the Middle East again. And I have been in Iraq, and now I'm writing scenes which are situated in Israel, and you can't escape. If you have begun to study Middle East, you will never escape in your lifetime. I'm telling this, and I'm thinking again about using motives, using allegories or metaphors from the classical literature, because literature always helps me to find another way than to talk like a journalist. I need literature, I need poetry, the classical Arabian poetry or the Hebraic Jewish poetry now, and books to find another way to talk and to describe the situation.
Sorry, did you say you had no punctuation?
Yeah.
No full stops, no semicolons?
No.
And in Arabic, of course, traditional Arabic, except for the Quran, there's no punctuation.
Yes, that's what I.
Is there any connection?
Yes, this was an idea I had to come near to the old texts by the structure. But the book is structured or is organized with you see it's not a block of sentences, but I jumped like you see it in poetry. And the idea is that the text flow is breathing with the characters. If they are excited, you have it flows, and if they are struggling, searching for words, it stops, and it's like there's a rhythm in and it's nearly to poetry. And as I found out that this was in the classical poetry, they made no punctuation. I was enthusiastic because and it was by chance, but I didn't know it at first. I discovered it after having written some parts of the novel.
Lovely. Thomas Lear, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.